That story happened in my senior year. My girlfriend and I both spent time studying in the library every day. One day she offered to take a day off to prepare my birthday gifts with her. Hearing that, I teased her that just wrapping her in my gift box would be fine. So she pinched my ears and said that I had some shady intentions in mind, right? I looked at her and said that she and I had known each other for a long time and should also consider getting married. I told my girlfriend that I didn't care much about my birthday because I looked quite old compared to the other students. By the way, I told her the story that made me miss school for 2 years and had a bad impression of my birthday. On my 12th birthday, my mother asked me to wear a red triangular paper bag. She said that the year was my year and told me to wear it every day, shouldn't tear it or lose it. Although I didn't like it very much, I still obeyed my mother's orders to wear a string with a red paper bag around the neck. Then I rushed to play with my friends. My friends and I gathered to play marbles together. When it was my turn, something embarrassing happened. When I crouched down, my red underwear was revealed. One of the guys in the group noticed and pulled my pants off. The group kept laughing at me, saying that I had a problem with my gender and thought I was an idiot. I held at him that I wasn't an idiot and told them I wore red underwear because this year was my year and my mother made me wear it. At this time, another guy living next door to my house confirmed that my mother had given me a red amulet and the underwear was related to that amulet. So he teased me and begged me to show the amulet on my neck. A few other friends also came and said they wanted to see my amulet. So I took off the amulet chain around my neck. My friends had never seen such amulets, so they all found it very strange. By the way, I was also joking that this amulet could help see ghosts.
Wow.
But unexpectedly, they believed my lie to be true. They came closer and took a closer look. I was afraid that if my friend held it too hard, it would tear my amulet, so I quickly got it back. But he lunged forward to snatch the amulet from my hand. I showed an unpleasant attitude, saying that this was not for fun. If the amulet was broken, I would be scolded by my mother. But that boy wanted to get my amulet, so he asked me to play marbles. He bet on 3 of the latest comic books in exchange for my amulet. After hearing that, we were all surprised. I had long wanted to read the 3 comic books he talked about, but he wouldn't lend it to us. With the instigation of other friends, I began to think. Yes, wasn't this amulet just a red paper bag? Therefore, he and I would decide whether to win or lose in the game of marbles. But unfortunately, I lost the necklace to my friend because, well, I lost. Looking at his proud appearance, I felt very uncomfortable. Without the amulet, I was just afraid of being scolded when I got home. After the amulet was taken by my friend, I had to walk home. When I got home, I kept quiet for fear that my family would find out that I had lost the amulet. Luckily, they didn't notice. For the next few days, my life went on as normal. Until the following weekend, we arranged to bake sweet potatoes on the hill where we used to go. When everyone was busy building a fire, my friend discovered something. He said he saw a coffin. He ran over and took a closer look. It was a broken coffin. It seemed to have been trapped by a landslide caused by heavy rain 2 days ago. Although curious, the stench emanating from the crack in the coffin lid made us nauseous. We were starting to get a little scared, but my friend didn't want to leave. He stood still, his eyes fixed on the crack in the coffin. Suddenly he turned his head and said with a worried look that he wanted to see what was inside the coffin. I advised him not to be so stupid, but he ignored me and still insisted on pulling it out, so I left, ignoring him. Seeing me ignore him, he aimed at my shame point with his red underwear. He said that I was only a coward. He also said that my amulet was fake, that I was just a liar, and that even our family lied. Frustrated, I turned around and told him that I wasn't afraid of what was inside the coffin and would open it with him to see what was inside. The two of us struggled for a long time and couldn't move the coffin because most of the coffin was still in the ground, and there was also a lot of dirt on top of it. The two of us continued to pull the coffin lid. Suddenly, the piece of wood he was pulling came loose. Before he could prepare, he lost his balance and fell backward. Fortunately, there were no serious problems. The coffin board was casually thrown aside by him. Looking at the pointed end of the board gave me chills. In the coffin, there was an opening big enough for us to get in. I could even try to glimpse the corpse inside. My friend remained unafraid and said he wanted to go inside to find out. In the blink of an eye, he jumped inside and urged me to follow. It was very dark inside, and the smell was disgusting. This coffin was just enough for the two of them to get in, but there was no room to turn around. I felt a dead body in front of me, so I was extremely worried. After struggling for a while, we finally hit a spark. My friend was not afraid at all. Although the light of the match was limited, we could still see the contents of the coffin. We were suddenly stunned by the sight before us, which was a shriveled woman's body. Because he was so scared, the match in his hand fell. Even more frightening, we saw between the legs of that woman still a dead baby. It was only partially protruding from the woman. Terrified, we all felt short of breath and quickly climbed out of the coffin. Seeing the two of us crying while running, the other two friends thought we saw zombies. They quickly asked us what happened. The friend described the situation in the coffin to them while I was breathing heavily next to it. It was probably the fastest run of my life. The potatoes were cooked. They invited us to eat baked sweet potatoes while comforting us. We looked at the two sweet potatoes that had been baked to the point of shriveling like the corpse we just saw now, so we both ran away and vomited. That night, because I was still haunted by the story in the afternoon, I couldn't eat dinner. Then I went to my room to go to bed early. At midnight, I had a high fever again. I was tired and I was dreaming. Suddenly, I found myself not in bed, but locked in a wooden box. It felt like being in a coffin. Someone next to me shouted, making me dumbfounded. I saw a woman with a pregnant woman lying next to me, screaming while banging on the board above. Suddenly, my view turned to the outside and I saw a large group of villagers gathered. I seemed to understand the problem. This woman was being buried alive by the men in the village. When the last piece of land was filled in, the woman's screams could barely be heard outside. More frightening at this time, the woman seemed to be about to give birth, holding her belly and crying in pain. But the oxygen in the coffin was getting weaker and weaker. At this point, the woman seemed to have exhausted all her strength. The scene was so real that I was so scared. I could only cover my eyes with my hands. In my dream, I vaguely heard my mother calling my name. At this time, I had a very high fever and my whole body was hot. My grandmother and mother were very worried. Grandma seemed to have discovered something. She sadly looked at my condition. In the blink of an eye, she discovered that the amulet on my neck was missing. My grandmother quickly went out in a hurry. Moments later, my grandmother came home with a red amulet in her hand. It turned out that she went to my friend's house to get it back. Although annoyed, I still tried to ask my grandmother about the amulet. She said this amulet was very important to me. It helped me to exercise and not be invaded by evil spirits. Then I put on the amulet and fell into a deep sleep. After taking the cold medicine, I immediately fell asleep. The following morning, my condition was basically recovered. Because I didn't eat yesterday, Now I ate like a hungry ghost. At this time, the friend we had baked sweet potatoes with the day before came running over and said that the friend who robbed my amulet was dead. I was stunned as soon as I heard that. I broke out in a cold sweat. I wondered if the female zombie in my dream killed him. My friend said he fell from a tree and died. Now the whole village was gathering to see the situation. More frightening, this was where we saw the coffin earlier. As we passed through the crowd, we saw his parents crying over his body. We were also shocked because his death was so tragic. He died because the wooden coffin lid was broken and thrown aside by him. Unexpectedly, his sharp piece was located under the tree where he took the bird's egg. The elders of the village proceeded to bury his body. My grandmother said that the amulet was my own. Even if he wore it, it wouldn't work. After hearing my story, my girlfriend was amazed. She thought it was a story I made up to comfort her. It sounded like a myth, but in reality, I was only saying what I had witnessed with my own eyes. This story happened to Shang's family. Shang's father was over 70 years old this year and was in the hospital in need of a liver transplant. Otherwise, it would be life-threatening. That day was the day of his blood test. If he was consistent, he could have a liver transplant for his father. As soon as the test was about to be completed, Shang and his wife were already sitting at the door of the laboratory waiting for the results. Throughout the day, he looked extremely worried. The wife also wondered because Shang looked worried about his blood test. Seeing that the wife also tried to comfort and reassure Shang, what Shang was even more worried about was whether his father, when he knew the test results, would be able to withstand the shock or not. The more he thought about it, the sadder he became. The wife was surprised, asking if he was hiding something without telling her, right? Seeing his wife asking, he didn't want to hide it anymore. What Shang was worried about was that he was not his father's biological child. If the test was not compatible, it meant that he had different bloodlines. It wouldn't be able to save his father. At that time, Shang began to explain everything clearly. He and his father used to live in a poor village. That year, Shang's mother was pregnant and his father was away for work. While being careless, she slipped and fell into the lake. When the villagers found her, she was already dead. His father was grieving. He was immediately informed and quickly returned home to take care of his wife's funeral. Because he was so miserable at night, he stayed at home drinking wine so that he could somewhat ease the pain of losing his wife. The more he drank, the sadder he became. In such a short time, he lost both his wife and children. He seemed unable to accept that reality. While drinking, while holding his wife's photo in his hand, he was in pain as if he was dying and coming back to life. At the moment of extreme suffering, he looked at the photo while sobbing with each choking sound. He started to have negative thoughts in his head. He wanted to commit suicide to follow his wife and children. Just as that thought was raging through his mind, there was a loud knock on the door outside. After thinking about it, he also suppressed his emotions and went out to open the door. It turned out to be Mrs. Meme, the village midwife. Almost all births in this village were delivered by a midwife. Meme held a baby in her arms. She said she came to give his son back to him. After hearing that, Shang's father was extremely surprised. His mouth could not utter a word. stammering to ask the older woman if there was a mistake or not. But she still insisted that this was his son. She said that he should receive the baby or else disappoint his wife. The baby cried very loudly, looked red, eyes not open yet. It seemed like a newborn baby. Unconsciously, he reached out to take the child from Mrs. Meme and held it in his lap. But then he asked Miss Meme again, what was this all about? Miss Meme said this was the child born to his wife. His wife had given birth at Meme's house earlier, and this was also the first time in her decade of work that she had encountered such a case. It rained heavily tonight. No one in the village gave birth. Miss Meme went to bed very early. Suddenly, she heard a knock on the door outside. When she woke up, she thought that someone had suddenly given birth prematurely. Why did it come at this hour? She decided to go out and open the door. But suddenly the door was flung open and it was pouring rain outside. Miss Meme was very old, so she had also experienced many strange things in life. So she knew for sure that the devil was bothering her. Thinking with fear, she sat under the blanket and shivered. In front of the door suddenly appeared the figure of a girl with long hair covering her face, wearing a sky blue dress, and her body was soaked from the rain. Despite being very scared, Miss Meme also tried to stay calm and asked the girl what she needed from her. Why did she come here to find Miss Meme in the middle of a rainy day like this? The girl was silent and did not say anything. Her pale face peeking out from behind her long wet hair looked terrifying. Miss Meme glanced at the girl again and discovered that her belly was very large, apparently pregnant. The girl walked straight into the house without saying a word, her shoes wet and covered with mud. Although scared, Miss Meme remained calm and asked the girl what she came here for. At this point, the girl slowly sat on the maternity bed, her face starting to show more clearly from the wet air. She looked up at Miss Meme, blue face and white eyes. The girl said to save her baby. Then she lay down on the bed while Meme delivered her baby. That night was the first time Miss Meme had seen a ghost give birth to a baby, and it was also her hand that delivered the baby, which made her a little hesitant. But the girl did nothing to harm Miss Meme. The girl kept begging Miss Meme to help her. Otherwise, it would be too late. At this time, Miss Meme only saw that the girl was very pitiful, so she put aside her fear and prepared the necessary things to help her deliver the baby. Everything was going very normally, no different from other birth cases of living people. After a while of struggling, the baby's voice rang out in the dark, a healthy and completely normal baby boy. The newborn baby cried very loudly. Now looking at the baby, Miss Meme forgot all the initial worries. At this time, Shang's mother did not say anything. She just lay there and looked at her son one last time, because she knew that this life was not destined to be with her child. Miss Meme rushed to get a warm blanket to cover the baby, afraid that the baby would get cold in the rain like this. Holding the baby in her lap, Miss Meme talked to the girl, informing her that the baby was adorable and healthy. Miss Meme thought that the baby's father would be very happy, and happy to see his son come back from the dead like this. But when Miss Meme turned to the bed to look at the girl, she was completely gone. The bed was still wet from the rainwater on the girl's body earlier. The door was open again, and it was still pouring rain outside. The girl gave birth to her baby and actually left. Miss Meme recounted everything she had just encountered to Shang's father. She thought that Shang's mother must have been able to escape safely. Hearing the story, Shang's father burst into tears like a child. That was all that Shang heard his father tell him, but he didn't believe it. He thought his father was cheated on, and he was not his biological son. Miss Meme also died a long time ago. No one could testify for Shang to find out the truth anymore. Worried, the nurse came from afar, preparing to report the test results to Shang. The nurse said that the results were compatible and asked him to follow her to prepare for admission and liver transplant. Speaking of which, both Shang and his wife were extremely surprised. Why could they be compatible? But when asked again, the nurse confirmed exactly 2 people were father and son. Nothing to be surprised about. Hearing this, Shang burst into tears. But until now, he never believed the story his father told him. After that, the surgery went smoothly. Shang's father also gradually recovered. Seeing his father healthy, Shang was very happy. Up until now, he had always thought of himself as his father's adopted son. Shang didn't expect that he was born in such thrilling circumstances. My name is Lucy. Since being seriously ill when I was young, I could see scary things around me. This ability had brought me a lot of trouble, but one experience at the age of 20 made me grateful for this ability. At that time, I felt guilty, thinking that I was not beautiful, so I decided to go for plastic surgery. But I didn't have much money, so I went to a cheap plastic surgery hospital found online. This place was also quite crowded, and the modern facilities here also made me feel somewhat secure. The lights in the large lobby were very bright and beautifully decorated. It was impossible to imagine such a beautiful hospital with such an extremely favorable surgery cost. When I arrived, a woman appeared claiming to be a beauty consultant. She greeted me warmly and led me to her room to advise me on the packages offered here. In the room, I sat across from the consultant, with a small mirror in the middle. When I looked in the mirror, I saw that my face was pale and dry. The beauty consultant saw me looking in the mirror and immediately pointed out that I should have had double eyelid surgery. When she said that, I felt that I needed to fix it all over my face. The beauty consultant saw that I was a little confused, so she got out an iPad and showed me their successful cases. That was before and after comparing pictures of other girls. But something strange happened, and I couldn't see the post-surgery pictures of the people inside the album. This thing was hard to understand. When I looked at the girl's nose in the picture, I couldn't see well with my eyes. Everything was very blurry and pale. I felt something was wrong, so I told the beauty consultant that I would go home and think about it some more. After hearing me say that, the beauty consultant said that if I was still interested or concerned about the cost, the hospital could reduce it even more. So I agreed. The following day I went to the plastic surgery hospital alone according to the scheduled appointment. Because I chose a very cheap package, I was arranged to have a surgery at night. The consultant referred a doctor to me and said that this was my primary surgeon. Strangely, I saw something appear beside him. At this time, I was worried when I saw a black shadow just clinging to the doctor. After going to the consultation room, the doctor arranged for me to sit in a chair and started drawing the contours of my face. He also showed me a mirror and asked me to confirm the lines of the monolid eye so that when in surgery, the accuracy would be high. But I suddenly saw a girl appear behind me in the mirror with a grey color. That thing gave me a bad feeling about the place. I suddenly panicked and turned around to look behind me. The doctor did not understand why I was so startled, but I saw that there was nothing. Behind me, just a clear glass window reflecting my somewhat horrified face. The doctor was taken aback by my actions and hurriedly asked me what was the matter. "How are you such wide eyes? Are you dissatisfied?" I regained my composure and was a little scared inside. I told the doctor that I did not want the surgery anymore. He said double eyelid surgery was a simple surgery and advised me not to worry too much. He said I should quickly put on the patient's clothes to do the surgery. So I also hoped the doctor would do it quickly for me. I also thought this eyelid surgery was not life-threatening, but when I entered the operating room, I seemed to hear a humming noise in my ears. I felt something behind me, so I turned to look. I saw a vague shadow from the door. It seemed to be staring at us. A nurse arranged for me to lie on the operating table and prepared to inject the anesthetic. My heart was still very anxious right now. I was restless. When I learned that I was going to have surgery, my mood was messy. I worried about possible side effects. The nurse told me that I didn't have to worry about it. It was completely safe for me since it was just a minor surgery. However, when the anesthetic was injected into my body, something strange happened. I started to feel dizzy and sizzling sound in my ears immediately became very loud. The sound was so loud that it hurt both my head and my ears. I had to cover my ears and groan. I couldn't stand it, so I shouted loudly. The doctor and nurse were shocked by my actions. They thought I might have been allergic to the anesthetic. I feel everything around me changed, becoming hazy. I was very uncomfortable, so the doctor asked me to stop the surgery and help me remove the headband used to fix the head. When I looked up, I saw the ghosts surrounding the doctor become extremely clear. It was the first time I had seen it so clearly. It was a very scary disfigured face, swollen flesh and many scars on the skin. The head was very big and the whole body was swollen. I didn't want to look anymore and covered my eyes. The ghost didn't seem to move but just followed the doctor closely. I sat up, my heart racing. At this moment I caught another glimpse of something terrible behind me. When I looked back, it turned out to be 3 other deformed ghosts. Their faces and bodies were both uneven. There was even a female ghost whose chest collapsed. I couldn't contain myself anymore. I screamed in utter fear. I panicked and ran out of the operating room with all my might despite the doctor and nurse's objections. As I ran through the corridor, I didn't know if I was hallucinating or not, because I saw a ghost in the window of the counseling room. There was also another ghost crouched down in the corner of the hallway. All around me ghosts appeared clearly. I rushed into the room of the beauty consultant and asked her for a refund because I wanted to leave immediately. However, the beauty consultant woman calmly withdrew the contract and showed me, and I realized that I was greedy for short-term interests and signed a stupid contract. Obviously, I was just injected with some anesthetic and didn't do anything. In the end, I only got some money back. The beauty consultant even sent security guards to watch me leave. Even though I was angry, there was nothing I could do. After this, I only occasionally went to the internet to look up news about this plastic surgery clinic. I hoped that one day they would be launched in a better form. Finally, I saw information that a young girl had committed suicide because of the failed plastic surgery. This news caused heated discussion among netizens, leading to the investigation of this plastic surgery hospital by relevant departments, and it had to be closed down. My father told me this story. There was a child called Lou in the village who had no parents and was raised by his blind grandfather. But as he grew older, Lou became a very rebellious young man who was also quite difficult and refused seeking work. Lou's grandpa tried all he could do to persuade him to change, but couldn't. Lou not only argued with his grandfather, but also when he watched his grandfather fall to the ground, he stood there looking without responding till the grandfather breathed his last. In addition to repeatedly peering into the local girl's bathroom, everyone in the village despised him as a result of this occurrence. While going along the street, Lou noticed a group of youngsters huddled and yelling from a distance. He arrived and observed the youngsters playing with a black cat. They looked like having a good time. Lou had been parentless since he was a kid, and he grew up with a blind grandfather, so he despised it when those kids had fun. Lou rushed over and forcefully shoved the youngsters away. Lou snatched the black cat, and the cat could only battle fiercely with his legs, clinging to find a way out.
"Give us the cat back!"
A weeping kid demanded, and Lou just snatched the black cat, disregarding the children following him, and headed home. He pulled out a kitchen knife in the house after returning home. Perhaps Lou tended to slaughter this cat. The black cat truly dropped tears in her eyes, pleading eyes, as though hoping Lou would let her go. Lou was astounded as well, because it was the first time he had seen a cat weep. But he remained unmoved. Instead, he had a weird smirk on his face, and in a blink of an eye he swung a knife and slaughtered the cat. The black cat's life was ruthlessly ended by the knife in Lou's hand. Lou wasn't scared of the black cat's eyes. On the contrary, they heightened Lou's wrath, and he proceeded to slash the cat. Next, Lou washed the flesh, heated the water, and cooked cat meat for dinner. Lou heartlessly threw the black cat's skin that was no longer usable on the ground. Lou was happy with what he had done to the black cat after a full dinner, and he gradually fell asleep. Lou lay down on the comfortable bed and promptly fell asleep. In his dream, Lou felt his scalp was itching and scratched it. But it was unsatisfyingly clawing his head with one hand. Lou clasped his hands together and scratched his scalp ferociously. Lou wanted to let go of his hands as soon as he realized something was wrong, but both hands seemed to be stuck. Lou attempted everything he could to remove his hands, but his scalp was torn by himself, from the top of his head to the center of his brows, and a great agony extended from the head to the rest of his body. Lou couldn't stop himself, slowly tearing his skin from top of his head to his face, down to his chest, as anguish crept throughout his body. Lou couldn't stop until his upper body was covered in blood, at which time the cat's meow caused him to turn his head in horror. After seeing everything clearly, Lou looked back, and what transpired in front of him made him panic. The black cat he had just eaten was standing behind Lou, her eyes filled with rage. Lou awoke from this nightmare, sitting on the bed, his entire body drenched in perspiration. When he raised his hand and glanced at his arm, Lou noticed that both arms were covered in crimson scars that resembled cat claws. Lou felt thirsty, walked out of the bedroom, saw the cat skeleton on the unclean table, and got a strange sense in his heart. Surprisingly, there were numerous dead rats lying on the floor. When the cat's skin was nowhere to be seen in the house, he started to panic. Lou appeared to be thinking exclusively about the horrible dream all day. He felt chilly all over. As he proceeded to the spot where he had caught the cat the day before, he was taken aback by a figure. A huge black cat was in that precise spot, gazing at Lou. Lou remembered his nightmare from the night before, and he was so terrified that he turned around and fled home. When he came home, he started to feel drowsy again. The nightmare from the night before had sapped virtually all of his energy, and Lou fell asleep again. This time, Lou was fully aware that he was in a dream, and his head was still aching. Despite his desire to control his arm, not to scratch his head. In his dream, Lou continued to rip his scalp with terrible anguish, and the sounds of cats meowing everywhere tormented him. Lou definitely noticed the black cat crouching on the ground nearby, looking at him with furious eyes. Lou was awakened again, his clothing drenched, gasping for air and feeling totally powerless. He returned his gaze to his body. He noticed that there were more scars than the day before, as well as some bloodstains in certain spots. When Lou stepped out of the bedroom and glanced at the pile of bones remaining on the table, he realized he had a solution. Lou searched for a while and found a bag in which he placed all of the cat bones. Lou got his luggage and proceeded to the village loan funeral store, where he asked the owner for some joss paper and gold bars, paper to burn, promising to give the owner money when he had it. When he heard Lou say he wanted to buy some joss papers, he realized Lou had a conscience and perhaps he wanted to burn it down for his grandfather. Lou immediately took the money and proceeded to leave the store without even expressing a word of thanks. He walked silently to a spot where no one passed, which was in the mountains, and seeing that the surroundings were calm in front of him, Lou placed his belongings on the ground. Lou knelt on the ground and began digging a hole. After digging, he inserted the bag of cat bones and covered them with soil. After finishing these, Lou knelt and burned the underworld money he had brought, mumbling supplications in his mouth. When Lou finished praying, he repeatedly bent his head into the cat tomb he had just filled. Lou stood up and walked down the mountain after finishing the job. As he neared the village, Lou occurred to pass by his grandpa's cemetery. Lou glanced at his grandfather's tomb and became enraged. He thought that the result of today was that his grandfather died too young. Otherwise, how could he eat cat meat? He cursed and stomped his grandfather's grave. After a few lines of reprimandedness, it was becoming dark and he didn't dare to remain any longer, so he hastily headed home. Lou sat on the bed at night, unable to sleep, since, although having handled the cat bone problem, he was still concerned. Finally, Lou couldn't fight back his tiredness and fell asleep without realizing it. He was woken up in the middle of the night because he needed to go to the bathroom. He found himself no longer having nightmares, which made him extremely pleased. Just as Lou was about to return to his room and sleep, he noticed two people standing beside the bed. Who is that? This dude's house is in shambles, so there's nothing to take. But as Lou arrived and saw those two, his face instantly became pale. His tone was no longer as powerful as before, and it turned out that these two guys were identical to him. They floated in the air, gently hovering like human skin lanterns. Their lips spat out a dead voice. Where are you? We were produced by your pride, envy, anger, sloth, greed, desire, and gluttony. The two of them were speaking while floating towards Lou, terrifying him to the point of wetting his pants. Lou stared at the two people floating in front of him. A look of terror emerged in his eyes, and he had a violent convulsion. Then a scream burst out from Lou's house. When the couple next door to Lou's house heard it, they hurried over to check what was happening. The elderly man next door came to Lou's door and started calling him. He knocked loudly, but no one responded. Without knowing what else to do, the man kicked the door open and burst in. Inside, Lou had foamed at the lips and collapsed to the ground, his hands covered in scars. A black cat's skin beside him. The old man pushed Lou onto the bed and pleaded with his wife to get a doctor in the village ASAP. The doctor arrived 30 minutes later. Following a thorough examination, the doctor determined that Lou was disease-free. He then said his goodbyes to the old man and left. The old man looked at Lou and felt terrible for him. Knowing that Lou grew up rebellious because he had no parents and had been hurt a lot since he was a youngster. When Lou awoke in the morning and opened his eyes to find the old man smiling at him, he fell into tears, realizing that someone cared about him. Lou's heart was affected, and he felt terribly remorseful in his heart as he reflected on what he had done previously and what had transpired in the previous few days, making him full of regret. Lou has changed for the better since then, and he now appeared to be a new guy. During my summer vacation that year, my parents allowed me to go to my grandmother's house to play, although my father stated that he would miss me greatly. But I knew that this was primarily due to my parents' desire to have some free time together without my presence in the house. My grandmother's house was built in the typical village style, and it brought back many memories for me every time I visited her. I might say that I loved being here, especially playing with the neighborhood kids. I also made a lot of friends here. We could play ball and many other folk games together every day. Our favorite game was hide and seek, and it was through this game that I learned of a terrible incident that occurred when I was 8 years old. We were all playing hide and seek at the time. I was the first person in the seeking role, and other boys had been seeking for a spot to hide very carefully, which was quite difficult to discover. Toro was the first one I found in the haystack. He might have been too sluggish to get away, because where he hid was very near to me. Then I glanced around and realized there might be someone lurking behind the abandoned stage adjacent to the wall, an abandoned stage that very few people dared to approach. I was on my way there when Toro stopped me and warned me not to go since no one dared to hide there. That area was really scary. I assumed he was attempting to conceal the boys who were hiding there, so I disregarded him and walked onto the stage to begin looking. There was a tiny tunnel between the stage and the rear wall, and I expected someone to hide there when I arrived, but there was no one there, which disappointed me. And in the end, I was mistaken. There was nothing but a pile of rubbish right there. Hiding in this location might cause you respiratory diseases.
Don't look here, since no one dares to hide here.
Toru came near the stage and ordered me to rush down since I couldn't locate anyone and had to listen to him. I didn't understand what happened before or why Toru was so concerned when he spotted me climbing there. I didn't trust him when he said the stage was haunted since I thought he was just trying to terrify me. To persuade me, he followed me and proceeded to terrify me more, claiming that spirits would be singing on the stage at night. And it looked like it was true. I went to Toru's house all day to play with him, and we spent the entire day watching cartoons until his mother informed us that it was dark. So I had to rush back. Otherwise, my grandma would be worried for me. Toro sent me to the door, and after saying my goodbyes, I crept back home. The village road at night was quite empty, with just a few lampposts with very weak light. I walked alone. The sound of footfall was very distinct, making me a bit scared. While strolling, I was listening to the sound of someone singing. The sound sounded extremely weird and mysterious. I turned my head and found myself right next to the stage where I visited this morning. The stage was filled with singing sounds, yet there was nothing on it. I wasn't sure who was singing on the other side of the stage, so out of curiosity, I strolled to the stage where the singing and music attracted me. As I came closer, I noticed two people on the stage, dressed in dramatic play actors' costumes. There was a masked face actor with a glossy paint job, and they were playing an ancient Three Kingdoms play that I had seen on television. They performed, sang, danced, and were visually appealing to spectators. I didn't really understand what those two artists were performing, but it was fascinating to see them sing and act. When the performance was finished, both actors on stage came to a halt and stared at me. The masked man charged at me, putting out his hand and beckoning, tugging my hand to join them on the stage. I could see his mask well now, and it was looking extremely sharp. Without any sense of danger, I willingly stretched out and was about to wrap the hand that was dragging me in front of my eyes. Someone touched me on the shoulder just as I was going to place my hand on that hand, which made me jump. I turned around and saw a neighbor who lived near my grandmother's house asking why I didn't return home because it was late and that I looked like I wanted to climb on the stage. I mentioned that there were two artists on stage and I wanted to show him. But as I turned back, there was no one on the stage, and the man was astounded as well because there was nothing in front of us. The man was exceedingly concerned and drew me home immediately. I turned to gaze in the direction of the stage again before leaving, since I didn't think I was mistaken. However, now that the stage was entirely empty, the silence made me shudder. When I arrived home, the neighbor informed my grandma about the event. My grandma was also well versed in the history of that stage. She couldn't help but be worried for me. I didn't believe I was in any danger. I couldn't say I was terrified because the two artists didn't do anything to me. But I did find it humorous. But Grandma took the situation seriously, so I asked her whether the two actors on stage were ghosts. My grandma groaned and explained that in the countryside, people said that even if you were fortunate to survive, bad luck might strike at any time if you encountered those spirits. I was intrigued at the moment, so I asked my grandma to tell me the tale of that period. My grandma didn't think twice before telling me. That stage was there many years ago, and those two artists were also members of the local band. People always invited them to sing at New Year's Eve, weddings, and funerals to express their condolences or share joy with the family. On one lovely day, wicked fascist troops were on their way to patrol the village, came across two artists who were practicing a play. They used guns to coerce them into singing a song they liked and then performing for them for entertainment. Those troops listened intently and clapped. They summoned these two artists to serve the general many times. They were later accused of being traitors to the motherland after the country was freed. Unfortunately, the two performers were executed on the same stage in the end. Both were shot dead without trial or the chance to claim innocence. There were tales that the stage was haunted by them since they died unjustly, unable to flee. Many individuals in the hamlet would be in danger if they heard someone singing on stage late at night. Surely awful things would happen to them, and many individuals perished on the stage, some by hanging inside, some by swallowing poisons, and all were implicated in the deaths of those two performers. My grandmother remarked that my destiny was unfortunate since, but unlike others, I was discovered and brought home by my neighbor. Otherwise, I might have been in danger. I shattered my arm that year. I wasn't sure whether it was what my grandma said, because I'd heard and seen them, so calamity had struck on me. It was also the last time I was allowed to return to my hometown and live with her. Perhaps the recollection of that haunting stage and her narrative would always be a fascinating memory in my life.